John and Angela Anderson are the ones who put up the $500 matching grant. And in 4 days, it was met, and we just somebody else, including some gifts from England and everywhere else. Now, I want to share with you, while I've got a moment here, why that turns out to be really important. We have now over 100 and some people that are affiliated in one way or another with All Souls, which means that we can no longer do things by the seat of our pants. We have to have a little bit more organization, which is something we've not done in the past, but we have to start doing that now. And thanks to that matching grant, we have enough money to cover a supply minister for 3 months. That's correct. On top of that, I got with Donald Grimmy today, and we're going to put together all of the services that All Souls has done since we've been doing it and putting it in a library. We've also got the template of how All Souls worship is put together. And Annette, who has done this for years at UU Miami and has experience with this, I've asked her temporarily, she would volunteer to step in. So if I got sick, she could very easily put together, based upon all the work we've done before, how you fill in a template in terms of our service. So things would be seamless. We would have the same order of worship, all kinds of things at hand, and we'd be able to afford volunteers. In short, how do we show that we've got an ability to function now well? And we've got, thanks to John and Angela, we've got the money now for backup for not just a week or two, but for at least 3 months. So between that and putting together, making us a little bit more focused, we're putting a little bit more of a focused background to All Souls. What I'm really talking about is conjuncting this with long-range planning. As you well know, when you're healthy, that is the time to make good decisions. And if you have something blow up in your face, the chances of our making bad decisions are really, really good. So the Long Range Planning Committee has been elected. They've got Serge is the chair. Samantha will be the secretary. I think Nick is the vice chair. And they've already been in touch with Tyler Coles. They're working at a first time to meet. Tyler asked me specifically, are you going soon? And I said, no, I hope to be knowing everybody at least for 2 to 3 more years. And his response was good. That way it gives us a nice chance to do some solid planning without anybody feeling rushed and just wiped out. So between long range planning, very healthy, John and Angela enabling us to have backup, Donald getting us a good library now of everything we've done, and Annette able to step in if we have a problem, putting together a worship template. That is a nice way to organize ourselves and get more solid in the summer and for the fall, winter, and spring. I guess what I'm trying to say is we're trying to find balance between being joyful and extemporaneous with some also a little bit of planning and focus, the balance between the two. We're going to be talking in August in the beginning about the 8th principle, and it's to talk about reminding ourselves we are against racism and injustice, and we'll be having some comments about that in August and asking us to vote on an 8th principle to add to our others. I want to remind everybody about our class. By the way, if you haven't ever attended one of our classes, you missed a classic example of how insane this gets. Somebody whose name will not go mentioned in front of everybody here today had a screen that was blackened, and I said, can we see your face today? What's wrong? And the person had the audacity to say, my hair looks awful, I'm not showing my face. And I said, show us your hair. And the response was, no. Well, I mean, the Reverend Doctor, no.
He was speechless for a couple of seconds, which is very unusual.
Yes. And then to make matters worse, we were role-playing cousins taking sides in a war, and the same person had the audacity to switch sides in an important time. It was hard. I mean, the place was a mess. In the meantime, I asked the question, by the way, who the heck is Billy Jonas? Why did I never hear of this person? And our resident Sufi from Bellingham says, oh, well, he's Billy Jonas. So I have learned about Billy Jonas, bad hair, being told no, and also a woman who plays spoons. It turns out one of our members gave me I have to share this with a woman from Asheville who plays spoons. Y'all are crazy. Spoons, Billy Jonas. Oh, and thanks to Joyce Anderson, it's pronounced Mahabharata. So I was pronouncing the Hindu classic wrong. It was quite a day yesterday. Gospel music was spoons. So, and on top of all of that, let me say hello to everybody. So that gives us a full house at the end of July. What a way to begin. All righty. We want to light the memorial candle today for the tragedy of ignorance. We have a number of people in this country who are now very sick, and many of them are going to die. In our own state, we have a governor who is out running around talking about borders while we now are one of the leaders of COVID's variant. Our hospitals are being filled in Tampa and other places, and people are refusing a vaccine that can save their life. So for those who simply refuse health and help, we really have to light a candle. There's nothing else we can do. Our introduction music is an old favorite. It is a combination of Jewish Eastern music, really kind of a combination of Hasidic music. And are you ready for this? Roma music, ancient Roma music. And it's called the Barcelona Klezmer Gypsy Band or Orchestra. Shalom Aleichem, if you would, Donald. We're going to ask Nick to lead us in the call to worship. He is going to read the small print, and we're going to read the large indented print in the call to worship. If you lead us, Nick.
You have been given questions to which you cannot be given answers.
You will have to live them out, perhaps a little at a time.
And how long is that going to take?
I don't know. As long as you live, perhaps.
That could be a long time.
I will tell you a further mystery. It may take longer. And Nick is going to lead us in the morning prayer for those who wish.
Let us look to this day, for it is life. The very breath of life. In his brief course lie all the realities of our existence. The bliss of growth, the glory of action, the splendor of beauty. For yesterday is only a dream, and tomorrow a vision. But today well lived makes every yesterday a dream of happiness, and every tomorrow a vision of hope.
Grant us, we ask, to speak, to hear, and to learn, so that our fears may be banished, our minds may become enlightened, our faith be increased, our steps directed towards you. I'd like to do kind of a recap. If somebody were to watch one of our services or come in, they might ask, is this religious at all? And I've learned that you can't really use the word religion anymore. It's been spoiled because of I have to be politically correct here. I have to be nice. The exuberant judgmentalism of evangelical white Christianity. Does that sound good? Exuberant judgmentalism of white Christianity, which has tried to enforce an unforceable, strict, and often inaccurate reading of holy text on the rest of the United States in terms of shaming and hurting people has driven people away even from the word religion. My students know they're taking a religion class, but they blank when they hear the word. If I say spiritual, then we can begin to talk. So what I'm asking you is, if you were to turn into this and have never been to All Souls, you might ask, is this religious? Let me say we are on a spiritual journey. I think what this is about is what grounds you and me and all of us is how do we cope about life? What gives us healthy ways to interact with our own selves and those around us? How do we rise above our primitive species' basic drives? As a species, we are a fascinating species. We can do so much good, and we can do so much incredibly bad. We take something good, and somehow somebody wants to weaponize it. It is an incredible species. And the religious, I should say, the spiritual journey is a journey to try to how we rise above primitive and basic animal instincts. I keep reminding everybody, people are sick of this, we are almost 99% DNA of chimpanzee. People don't like to hear that. Have you ever looked at a full-grown male or female chimp? And I'm not talking about the sweet-loving bonobos. I'm talking about the regular chimpanzee. They are strong and powerful. They're cannibalistic, territorial, and can be very nasty. That, folks, is our DNA. The spiritual journey is, how do you tame that? How do you rise above that? How do you find that within you, which is more than the DNA of a chimpanzee that can be cannibalistic and territorialistic? How do you do that? How do you interrelate with a healthy you and healthy others? The reality is, though every religion has had those in that religion to try to make everybody believe the same thing, the reality is each of us has different points of view, different tastes, different ways of looking at things, different ways of processing. Good heavens, William James, I think it was back in 1920, wrote the famous lectures, the Gifford lectures, Varieties of Religious Experience. Carl Jung pointed that out as a psychoanalyst. He was even followed by Joseph Campbell. There are varieties of ways of watching the same thing. You know that as well as I do. So to try to make everybody have the same path isn't going to work. But paths we try to take. We try to find strength. We try to find enlightenment, joy, silliness, fun, all of that we try to find to rise above basic instincts in our species. We also try to find a community of seekers. People are not demanding we follow each other's path, but we learn from each other. And that can take funny forms, as I shared with you earlier. I'd never heard of Billy Jonas. I've never seen a woman playing spoons. You're also going to see after this, if you listen very carefully, a cow mooing before this great piece that's done in somebody's backyard. I mean, this stuff we learn from each other. And so I'm not asking you to follow my path. You're not asking me to follow yours, but in strength of listening to each other's ways of learning in our spiritual journey, we can even learn more and access more. How do we ground ourselves? My own journey is a tapestry, and I'm not asking anybody, but this is simply an example of how we can put a tapestry together, because that's what I like to call it, a tapestry or a faith house, whatever phrases you want. I have moved in my own journey from seeing God as an entity to adopting, and I never even thought of this before till I was introduced to it, the idea, the Hindu idea of all things, of divine reality everywhere. I like the Buddha idea that there is in Mahayana Buddhism the sense that everybody has the possibility of becoming enlightened. I find that fascinating. It's egalitarian, non-racist, non-gender. Everybody has the possibility. One of the things that I have found mentally helpful, I never heard before until I was teaching world religion class. You may have heard the word Tao or Taoism, but Taoism is fascinating. Harold Bontrager, I know I'm digressing here, stopped me in the middle of a church meeting when I was out in Chicago, this enormous congregation, and he stops the meeting and he goes, I'm worried about Kenneth and rocking chair time. I am absolutely going ballistic. This is the Midwest. I'm from the Northeast. We have an agenda to follow. Thank you very much. What is he talking about? Rocking chairs. Have you ever met Howard Bontrager? He wore these big flannel shirts, these big flannel baggy jeans. He looked like somebody who just was dressed at Goodwill. He was one of the most successful brokers in the Chicago Mercantile Association. But to look at him, so then he starts with, I'm worried about rocking chair time. In my mind, I'm going nuts. He says, my grandfather, that did it for me. He said, goes out every afternoon at 4 o'clock and sits and rocks. I'm from the Northeast. This makes no sense for me. He says, for a half hour, he turns everything off and he rocks. And he connects quietly with what he senses is reality that's full of energy and healing. And he also says, this too shall pass. You need patience. This is driving me nuts. His grandfather was a Taoist, didn't know it, and I didn't know what he was talking about. 3 months later, I get sick and almost die. Why? Because I had no time off, no rocking chair, no sense of patience, no sense of ebb and flow. His grandfather never went to college, got it all. Taoism talks about ebb and flow and how can you be quiet for a moment and sense what is there for everybody. Confucius was born 2,500 years ago and has virtues. 3 or 4 basic inner and 3 or 4 basic outer virtues. It is annoying to me they are as good today as they were then, and one of them is self-correcting wisdom. How do you learn to keep in touch with your inner self? What you screw up and what do you learn to, how do you ground yourself and learn to deal with all this? I found Jesus' teachings did not disappear. I liked his teachings even more as I embraced him as a teacher, and I found for me and my own path, his teachings were a gateway for me to discover other teachings. Everybody needs a gateway. Everybody needs somebody that opens doors. For somebody, it may be a Sophie poet. For somebody, it may be some rabbinic literature. For somebody, it may be an ethical writing. You name it, but everybody needs a gateway. Somebody to point the way. For me, I thought the simple teachings of Jesus, which, by the way, most people have never actually read. We've read angry preachers telling us what Jesus said, but interestingly enough, when you actually read what he said, it doesn't quite match up with the anger stemming forth from the pulpit. And then I like Rumi. I never heard of Rumi. My ignorance is amazing. I never cease to be amazed at how ignorant I am. 2 things that Rumi said that I don't think I press this on my students all the time. That thing about sorrow prepares you for joy. That is worth 10 trips to the psychiatrist. Sorrow prepares you for joy. It rips up all this junk you've got in you so you can make way for new things. In that really annoying poem, your body is a guest house. You're a guest house. All kinds of people arrive, and they're not necessarily nice, but welcome them all. Why? Because they may be a guide for how you should live now and in the future. 2 poems by somebody who's born in Afghanistan, lives in the 1200s. Really? He sounds like a modern psychiatrist. Really? And so for me, a tapestry, and I'm sharing this with you, is what we do. We learn, we listen, we adapt, and we listen to each other. So what we do is we talk about how are we? What is our spiritual journey? Can we learn from each other as we navigate what Melville called this strange mixed affair we call life? Which brings us today to mindfulness. Our species is incredible for getting bogged in the toxic past or paralyzed by the future. Now, I don't know if any of you have dogs. If you've ever noticed, dogs do not seem to be interested in being paralyzed by a toxic past. They don't seem to be paralyzed by the future. They start each day afresh, no resentment, no grievance. Do you ever think about that? No resentment, no grievance. They start the day wagging their tails, ready to go. Yes. I remember Will Rogers. He says, when dogs die, when I die, I want to go where dogs go when they die. You know, you take a look at a dog, the cat. I seem to have always had a cat in my life. The cat comes in, Goes over, pesters the dog pesters the cat. They begin the day, no resentment, no grievance. They're in the now. What do we do with ourselves with the past? I have a list here. It is by no means exhaustive. We absolutely drive ourselves nuts with failure. I've never understood humankind. Why is it that which helps us grow up and learn, we shame? God forbid you fail something. Holy mackerel, the roof comes down on you. People yell at you. You're made to feel bad. How the heck do you learn to grow up? I remember I gave that last lecture. And how do I begin with failure? Yes, I began the last lecture with a whole thing on failure, pointing out that one of the greatest failures of all time was J.K. Rowling. You ought to read about this. She was so poor after her divorce, she rented a flat in Edinburgh. She had to borrow money and get a grant for $60 for a typewriter. I don't even know what a typewriter is anymore. A typewriter. She wrote a draft. It was refused 22 times before somebody picked it up and became Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. She didn't have any typing paper, so she goes to Nichols Cafe and types out the manuscript on things that you use to wipe your face with and napkins. Wrote notes. She said before she wrote the book, her marriage was a failure. She became depressed. She had postpartum blues. She was poor as you can get in the UK, and her manuscript had been rejected 22 times. How's that, duckies? How do you like that for failure? And she carries on. I mean, what is it about failure? Somehow we have this thing in the United States. You go straight up or that's it. So then I shared with the audience some of my more spectacular failures. And afterwards, people said to me, did that really happen? I said, oh, no, I made them up. Of course that happened. Why do you think I was sharing it? I said, why is it we shame people? How do you grow up? How do you learn? You learn from your mistakes. But what do? We shame ourselves by dwelling on the past. Oh, that's really healthy. Marriages, some of you have got it right the first time. I'm always fascinated by that. Some of you have got it right the first time. How you do that, I have no idea. I think it's fabulous. I did not. And I mentioned to my students, they talk about, well, you and Maria Teresa have been together 23 years. I said, subtract those numbers from my age. I said, you'll probably need a calculator. So you take my age, you subtract 23. And I said, there's several decades. And I said, I had the joy, I said, that's the wrong word, of taking relationships and totally messing them up. I said, I turned that into an art form. I said, disasters everywhere. And I said, I don't know about you, but many people have been divorced, or maybe they were smart and never got married to begin with. Whatever it is, relationships don't always end well. And how many of you remember the famous, it's not you, it's me? Yes, we dwell on this stuff. Life goals. How many of you get to a certain age and realize you haven't done your life goals? So what do? You beat yourself up. Another one, health scares. Everybody's had health scares, but some of them we just can't let go of. Everybody has had, and let me make this very, very clear. Now, if you haven't, let me know, but everybody I know has had general anxiety from one time or another, and everybody gets depressed from one time or another. That's known as Humanity 101. But why do we beat ourselves up from this? It's like you feel anxious. Oh, hello. Have you ever woken up and for no reason at all felt anxious? You have no idea why. You just wake up and you're feeling, yes, you get out of bed and if you look in the mirror will crack. That's especially accentuated if you go to take a hot shower and there's only cold water and then there's no coffee. That just is wonderful for your anxiety. It's like it's out to get you, whatever the it is. And then there's family dysfunction. You and I don't know about you, I was raised that the American family was 2.5 kids in a perfect marriage, in a picket fence, 2 dogs, and you had the magnificent house, and everybody was Leave It to Beaver, the Nelson family, and everything was just wonderful. Really? I never discussed that. I never found that. I've never found anybody that had the perfect family. Dysfunction, confusion, sibling rivalry, one of your parents you wanted to put in the microwave, even though a microwave didn't exist, all of that stuff. This I found was to be normal. So I kept on looking at the ideal family. I thought, okay, where is it? And some of us feel badly about that. And then there's even occasionally a family suicide. I should have a sermon on suicide sometime. I have deep, deep compassion for those who are in such pain. That is all they can, that's all that's left. The shaming of someone who has such pain is not a healthy, happy, good thing to do. Again, I'll have to talk about it later. Then we talk about the future. I was writing out this list, and sometimes, you know, I'm not very bright. I started looking at the same things that paralyze us for the future. And guess what? That list was almost the same thing that was in the past. Think about that. What paralyzes us is in the future? Afraid of failure, afraid of not getting it right, health scares, not getting our goals met, life goals. What if a relationship breaks up? What if somebody dies? I tease Maria. One of her names in Spanish is Jaramillo. So somehow I got that Harry Mijo. I was doing it. I didn't get the Anglo right. So I called her Harry Mijo. Then from that, I get Harry. And now I started calling Maria Harold. So I told her that when I die, I'm going to come back and called her Harold every night at 2 a.m. in the morning. Fear of losing somebody, health scares, finance. These are the same things we were worried about in the past. It's like the past has this thing of holding on to us toxically. And then we jump to the future, we get paralyzed all over the place. This is not a good way to live. I think you'll agree. And then in comes to all of this, the 14th Dalai Lama. And what does he say? Something so simple, it's brilliant. There are only 2 days in the year that nothing can be done. There are only 2 days in the year that nothing can be done. One is called yesterday, and the other is called tomorrow. Today is the right day to love, believe, do, and mostly live. Hello, that should be in gold. That should be, you know, they should give you 3 things when you're born: a birth certificate, your DNA printout to show you how many races you have in you, and this thing from the Dalai Lama. That's what you should get when you're born. And yet our species is intent on driving us nuts with a toxic past and a paralyzing future. Maybe not. There is this thing called mindfulness. And yes, I didn't know about that either till Nanette bothered me about that several years ago and said to me, there's something about mindfulness. You ought to pay attention to this. So I did. And the question is, how do you anchor yourself here and now? How do you deal with, hello, let me read this thing again. There are only 2 days in the year that nothing can be done, yesterday and tomorrow. Today, mindfulness, today is the right day to love, believe, do, and mostly live. How do we move past the toxic past in the future that doesn't paralyze you? There are, much to my annoyance, a zillion ways to do this. If you go online, mindfulness is a big deal. A couple of 100 books for sale on Amazon. They're all different kinds of Buddhist, Hindu, Sufi practices on how to do mindfulness. I want to share one from James Ford. Some of you may know James Ford. James Ford is a Buddhist clergyman in the UUA. He's now retired, and he has 3 things that he suggests for all of us, one of which I'm going to disagree with violently. That's the wrong word. Passionately is better. He says, sit down, shut up, and pay attention. Very simple. Sit down, shut up, and pay attention. Number 1, let me disagree with sit down. Not everybody can sit down. Sorry about that. Let me point out that some people genetically are not capable of sitting still for a long period of time, so let's not shame them about that. Let's go to the Hindu idea of Hatha exercise or Hatha yogas where you exercise. It does the same thing. You need to know, by the way, before COVID, this is a true story, before COVID, there was this thing in each of my religion classes where they take out a watch and they would want to see how long I could actually sit in the chair at the table lecturing before I got up. And the semester, before we broke in the middle of the semester, says you broke a record. I said, what does that mean? They said your average is 2.5 minutes before you have to get up and walk around and start lecturing. Today you lasted 3 minutes. You broke a record. So don't tell me you have to sit down to meditate. There is exercise, there is walking, there is running, there is biking. You don't have to sit down. Sorry about that. So when James Ford sit down, I want to do the Hindu thing. If you can exercise, walking, you can meditate while walking. You can meditate while doing yoga postures. You can meditate while biking. You can meditate a number of ways, however you do it. Get your mind off of everything that's clouding it up. When you're walking, have you ever looked at the trees around you? Have you ever looked at the flowers around you? Have you ever looked at the birds? We have birds, believe it or not. And if you don't like that, go out in the backyard at night. You may actually see something you haven't seen in a long while. They're called stars. Stars are up there. By the way, have you ever looked at stars lately? When was the last time anybody looked at stars and thought, hey, they're free. You can actually look at this. And it's amazing what happens when you look at stars. You feel like a 5-year-old all over again. Like, this isn't the back. It's free. You didn't need a ticket to look at stars in your backyard. The idea is do something other than just complaining and whining. Exercise. Look. Then he says, shut up. Many of you can do this easily. Some of us have a problem. The idea is to be quiet, verbally and mentally. And it's a good thing to learn. Exercise or sit, be quiet. We played meditation music this morning. Wasn't it beautiful? Did you notice when we played the music, everybody's blood pressure dropped? Everybody was calm? Wasn't that wonderful? I mean, in the middle of a worship service, you took time out to be calm and to relax. And then number 3 is pay attention. Pay attention to you. Are you living this day? Are you loving this day? Are you following your tapestry of your faith journey this day? Are you mostly living this day? There are things around you that can absolutely surprise you. I don't know if you know Melissa Merwin. She adopted a dog yesterday. And the dog, she was told, was a stray. So what does the dog do? She's out spraying the bushes, and the dog decides to take a lap in the pool. Jumps in the pool, does a couple of laps, and gets out on its own, shags itself down. Happy as a clam, goes over and just starts smelling the bushes. The dog's got it together, we don't. Goes out, takes a couple of laps, stretches, exercises, sniffs the things, then it rolls over on its back, happy as a clam. I said, that dog is not a stray. The dog was abandoned, has come home now and is going to show you how to live. Take a lap, smell the bushes, and relax. You will find a way to sit down, to shut up, and to pay attention. Now, there are a couple of things we want to say about mindfulness before I close. We have to be aware of mindfulness. There's this selling of mindfulness as if it's like it's a drug. You know, it's the idea is to make you just not worry about anything. Forget the past, don't worry about the future. It's like this instant panacea. That is not what Hindu and Buddhist and Muslim mindfulness is all about. Mindfulness is trying to anchor yourself holistically in the now, realizing that when you pay attention, you also see there is social justice to be done and things to be fixed. Mindfulness is not accepting the status quo. Mindfulness is not just saying, oh, isn't everything wonderful? Mindfulness is a time to get centered, rediscover yourself, and rediscover that part of yourself is interacting for others. And if others are being treated poorly or unjustly, you've got to do something about it. Buddha had 3 poisons: greed, anger, and I forgot the third one, and I lost it in my notes. The 3 poisons, and mindfulness is to get you moving to deal with those 3 poisons so you don't poison yourself and others. So as we accept the idea we need to sit down or move around, shut up and pay attention, part of the paying attention of living today, believing today, loving today is to remind ourselves there are others that need to be loved, believed in, and hoped for, and given justice to. It's a twofold thing. It's the famous Hindu synthesis, if you will. You take time out, you read, you study, you learn, but then you do. You need to do both. So I end with Jesus. Jesus gave a rabbinic quote. This was not new to Jesus. It was a rabbinic quote. He said, love your neighbor as yourself. Well, you can't love anybody if you don't love yourself. And one of the ways of loving yourself is coming in touch with loving for today, living for today, believing for today. Or as our resident Sufi says, how do you get rid of the ego, get below that, and you find the real soul within yourself? And Jesus has said, once you're doing that, then think of others, love others, do for others. Or as he so eloquently put in the Gospel of Luke, go thou and do likewise. Amen. And now we have a gospel rendition of I Saw the Light. It's a wonderful piece of music. Listen to the cow.
All right, you're on.
You missed the cow. In the very beginning, you missed this huge, I know we couldn't hear it, but if you listen to it at home, there is this big moo. And for those of us in an urban area, it's as bad as seeing chickens at Walmart. Those of you who've ever been to Walmart here in Miami, you will see roosters and chickens. And if you live in Kendall, a suburb, there are roosters every morning to greet the dog and I. It's frightening. We always when we are gathered together, offer a very ancient custom of offering a moment of bread and cup to those of us who wish to have a moment to say hello and fellowship. This is not weaponized. It's not a divine heavy mystery. It goes back to probably the Levant millennia before Jesus and Hebrew thought were written down. How do you welcome somebody when you don't have much? You offer bread and some watered down wine because you can't trust the water as an act of friendship. And even in the book of Leviticus, it says you welcome the stranger. So we always offered bread, unleavened bread. We offered a simple cup filled with unfermented wine. And we would ask everybody who wished to come forward and to share a bit of bread and a bit of cup together. This did not always work for everybody, but we always made sure that our circle included everybody. And when we stand together, I ask you symbolically, if you will, to think of holding hands with the person next to you. And if you'd repeat after me these words that we have now used for years. And yes, some of you'll notice they are some of them from Winnie the Pooh. Promise me you'll remember. You are braver than you believe. Stronger than you seem, smarter than you think. God didn't promise days without pain, laughter without sorrows, sun without rain. But the divine did promise strength for the day, comfort for the tears, and light for the way. The famous black chip, this, again, we always remind people, we stole from NA and AA. This is not a toxic moment. This is a moment of saying, come on, if we've got something to work on, we need to work on it. And if you're going to be in a fellowship like this, where you've got all sorts of conditions, we can always be honest to say we got something to work on. Does anybody need to return one? Does anybody need to return a black chip today? And remember, if you don't have any of these, email me and I'll send you a bucket full. Does anybody need to pick one up? Does anybody need, Maureen needs to pick up 3. That's excellent. That's from yesterday, by the way. Does anybody, yes, for those of you who were there yesterday, you'll see why she's picking up 3 from yesterday. Anybody else need to pick up a black chip? We'll have a concluding prayer, some Bob Marley, which is good after our talk about mindfulness and the past and the future. And then we'll have a final blessing that involves Irish and Hindu thought. A prayer. May the blessings of the divine be upon us in this hour and in the days to come, that we may seek the truth more devotedly, that we may think more independently, that we may reflect more searchingly, we may know ourselves more completely, we may forgive more quickly, pray and think more thoughtfully, act more courageously, and live more nobly. And Bob Marley, give us some thoughts for the day. We conclude with a blessing, and then don't anybody go away. Let's have a chance to say goodbye to everybody. Hello and goodbye at the same time. A blessing. May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. May the rains fall softly upon your fields. And when we meet again, may the divine in me greet and embrace the divine in you. Amen. Again, I want to thank everybody for showing up today. Our activity, our response, our seeing each other regularly, even in the dead of summer, has been overwhelmingly wonderful. The energy, the things you share with me to bring out to everybody else. Billy Jonas, that was a wonderful reading of his lyrics. I'd never seen that before. I'll have to do some of that spoon thing to show you some of that. Was wild. The readings and a lot of this you share are really helpful to me because I obviously do not have a vocabulary and a library that's everything. So when you share things with me and readings and stuff, I will find a way to plug them in. So thank you. Again, I want to thank everybody for matching the grant that John and Angela did. That covers us for 3 months if we need a sub. I want to thank Donald Grimmy for putting together the library of all the services we have done. And I want to thank Nanette for volunteering temporarily to be able to be sure that we've got a template and we're ready to go no matter what happens. So we're balancing between kind of like being our old, regular, energetic, crazy selves with showing some organization and some focus, trying to keep that in balance. So thank you all. We'll be meeting on the 15th and the 29th in August, and I will be sending you all of that, the 15th. And I just talked to Aurelie. For those of you like an in-service service where we can actually see people, she has agreed to do it the 3rd Sunday of the month in September, October, November, and Christmas Eve. So we'll do Zoom and on the 2nd and 4th, and then the 3rd Sunday we'll meet at Aurelie's. So a little bit of everything for everybody, and thank you very, very much. Keep safe, keep well.
Very nice service.
Bye.
Bye-bye now.
Go to USA.